Hello, my fellow YouTuber and person who is interested in hang gliding. Welcome to Gone Gliding. My name is Jason, and this is video number 4 in a 5-part series of videos to help you prepare for the Hang 2 written test that is administered by the United States Hang Gliding and Paragliding Association, or USHPA. If you happen to be jumping in this series of videos at video 2, 3, 4, or 5, go back to video 1 and watch these chronologically because I think that it will help you. Although I guess you could skip around these if you need to. Anyway, I would love some feedback. Please feel free to subscribe to my channel. It really helps out the channel and growing and just spreading the message about hang gliding and hopefully getting more people interested in this sport. Leave a comment, give me that thumbs up button. The support just really helps the channel overall and supports the sport of hang gliding. Thanks for watching and good luck on your Hang 2 test. Can't wait for you to pass so that you can come fly with me.
All right, here we go. We are going to start off with number 33. It says, imagine that you are flying a little bit faster than trim speed at 50 feet AGL, or above ground level, on final approach toward a target. Then you realize that you're too high above the ground and will overshoot the target and land at the far end of a field. In order to cut your glide on this final approach, you should do what? Okay, so essentially think of this like you're gonna land and you're trying to land at a specific target. You're coming in too high, you need to lose altitude. Your options are pull in the base bar to dive a bit, then level off as you normally would and then land. Option B is push out on the base bar or down tubes to slow down so you don't overshoot your target. So essentially kind of sort of flaring a little bit, increasing your angle of attack to slow down. Option C is fly as slow as possible until you're about 10 feet off the ground. And option D is slow to minimum sink speed and add in some S-turns. Okay, so a bunch of different options here of what we could do. Feel free to pause this video, reread the question, look at your answer options. Pause it, think about how you would answer it on the Hang 2 test, and then unpause it, come back for the answer. Okay, welcome back. So the answer to question 33 is A. Pull in the base bar to dive a bit, then level off as you would normally and land. Okay, so let's go to page 166 in the book. We can find the answer here. Page 166 gives us some really good information in this orange highlighted section here on the right of the page. It says, if it appears that you'll overshoot the landing spot, you can reduce your glide by pulling in hard to speed up and rotating to an upright position to generate extra drag. Okay, so this is going to be like one of those situationally dependent scenarios. And depending on how much altitude you have different options. So it can be a little bit confusing on this one about what to do. But the reason, and other than just it being here in the book, but the reason why the answer is A is because we can actually rule out these other answers as not the smartest thing to do. Because if we look at option B, it says to push out on the base bar or down tubes to slow down so that you don't overshoot your target. Well, that's going to put you into a stall, really. And as we have learned, we know that if we take away our speed in the hang glider, we lose control for our roll inputs. And you just can't really control the glider in a stall. And so if you're only 50 feet AGL and you're slowing yourself down to a stall and you're losing all your ability to control the glider, that's a very dangerous situation. You don't want to find yourself in that situation. So we're going to rule out B because of that. Option C says to fly as slow as possible until you're about 10 feet off the ground. Again, you're potentially putting yourself into stall territory, maybe mushing territory, And certainly you're putting yourself into a situation, if you're flying as slow as possible, you're not going to be able to control the glider very well. When you're that close to the ground, that's dangerous. So remember that pulling in on the base bars is important when you're launching and when you're landing. Like, that speed is very important. You've got different gradients of wind, the lower and closer you get to the ground. And so you want to be careful of that and prepare for that potential sink that could be there. And then option D, again, fly to minimum sink speed and add in some S-turns. At 50 feet AGL, not a great idea. S-turns are something that you utilize as a pilot in scenarios where you want to lose altitude, because we know that we lose altitude when we turn, right? Unless we're coring in a thermal or something, you are going to lose altitude with those S-turns. That's the whole point of using them. So every single answer of B, C, and D is a risky scenario when you're 50 feet AGL, and these answers are fly slow and lose altitude through S-turns. Not very smart. And that's one of the best ways that if you see a question like this on the test, you actually do want to pull in the base bar to increase your speed, decrease your altitude, and still maintain control of the glider. So hopefully that helps on that one, and we will now move on to question 34. All right, question 34. A pilot attempts a smooth flight by keeping constant speed throughout a flight. After flying upwind, the pilot does a 180-degree turn. The pilot completes the turn, then flies with a tailwind and eases the control bar out to maintain ground speed the same as before entering the turn. The pilot is A, confusing airspeed and ground speed control, B, in danger of starting a downwind stall, C, maintaining constant airspeeds, or D, answers A and B. Okay, so again, there's some terminology that you can use in a few different ways here. In this scenario, they're saying that you're flying upwind. That means you're flying into a headwind, right? And we cannot penetrate through a headwind and fly as far as we can if we do this 180-degree turn and now have a tailwind at our back, or we're flying downwind, right? Because that's going to push us further. So keep those two things in mind. You've got tailwind, downwind, and you've got headwind, upwind. Pretty much interchangeable terms, so think about it that way. So you're flying into the wind, you do a 180-degree turn, now you've got this tailwind making you go faster. You ease out your control bar so you can try to maintain your ground speed. What are the potential things that could happen? Okay, so read over those questions, think about how you would answer it, pause it, and then come back to the video and we'll do the answer. Welcome back. All right, the answer to question number 34 is D. It is both answer A and B. So in this situation, the pilot is confusing airspeed and ground speed control. You never want to do that. You always want to fly the airspeed, fly the air, don't fly the ground. And option B is also true, that you're in danger of starting a downwind stall. So let's go to page 142 in the book, and we're going to look at this. And here across this whole page, there's some really good answers here. But in the top left, in the yellow, it says, flying in a strong headwind will result in very low effective glide ratio, essentially meaning that it cuts your glide. You can't penetrate as far into the wind as you can when the wind is helping push you through the air, as a tailwind would do. So then it goes to flying downwind, or a tailwind, and it says you will be carried along with the wind and able to travel much further. So that's important. Then we go down to the flight tip area here in the gray, and it says, because the ground may be speeding by terrifically fast as you fly downwind, there is a great temptation to slow down, right? And that's exactly what they're talking about here in question 34, is that you're trying to maintain that same ground speed you had before when you were fighting the headwind. And it's just not going to work that way. So it says, but don't do it. You'll be setting yourself up for a dangerous stall. So that's where answer B comes from right there. You're starting a downwind stall. And yes, that is possible. And you need to be very careful about that. Go down further here in the gray section. It says airspeed and ground speed have nothing to do with each other. The only thing that counts is how fast you're flying through the air. So again, there is a little saying that says, you know, fly the airspeed, not the ground speed. Fly the air, not the ground. It sort of matters what the ground is doing, depending on your level of skill, ability, et cetera, et cetera. You don't want to get yourself into a situation where the ground is literally just zipping by incredibly fast and you're terrified. Obviously, you don't want to be in that situation. But you need to know that if you're ever in some sort of situation like that, that just pushing out on the control bar to try to slow yourself down could put you into a very dangerous stall. And so you have to be careful of that. So don't confuse airspeed and ground speed is really the point. All right, let's go check out number 35. All right, number 35. The question says, imagine that you're about to land and have just begun to flare with a bit of excess speed. You began the flare too early, so you begin to climb. You should, A, keep pushing the flare out and prepare to land rough. Option B, pull the base bar in to recover airspeed and then do another flare attempt. Option C, hold pitch attitude until the climb stops and then complete your flare. Or D, hold pitch attitude and prepare to land rough. All right, so I think this question and these answers make quite a bit of sense. So think about how you would answer this one and then pause it and then come on back. All right, welcome back. So the answer to question 35 is option C. You want to hold the pitch attitude until the climb stops and then complete your flare. So let's find the answer here on page 58 and we'll review that. It says, never take back a landing flare, okay? Once you've started pushing out on the control bar to flare, don't pull it back in. If the glider climbs, hold the bar in the same position until the climb stops, then continue your push out. If you've flared too high and end up in a stall high above the ground, it's important to keep your arms extended to keep the nose up. The glider will automatically try to nose down and recover from the stall attitude, but don't let it. There's not enough altitude for the glider to dive and recover, so you would hit the ground. Instead, lock your arms out to full extension to keep the nose up. The glider will parachute to the ground in a nose-high attitude as long as you hold your arms out. If you relax your forward pressure, the nose will rotate down. All right, everybody, we have not gotten to use the little glider model in a minute, so let's do that right now. So imagine that what they're talking about is you're coming in to land, right? And you've started to flare. Maybe you haven't fully flared, but you've started that flare and you notice that your glider begins to climb, okay? So in that situation, it's saying hold the pitch attitude of whatever input you put in. So if you're flying along, you add some pitch attitude and it starts to climb, hold it there. Don't let it nose back down. Don't flare it more. Hold it. And as it kind of starts to slow down, then complete your flare. And I hope that that makes sense, because if you flare too much, and I've seen people do this in an LZ actually, if you flare too much, it literally can climb up and then it will slam down. Your glider is going to want to, if you start to put it into a stall, it's slowing down as you've put in, you know, some sort of pitch input at whatever angle. You've increased that angle of attack, and because you wanted to begin to start slowing down and hopefully flare, but you just did it too early, right? So if it begins to stall, your glider is going to want to recover. It's going to want to nose down automatically on its own, and you have to fight that. So you have to keep pushing up on those down tubes, not increasing the angle even more, but holding it and fighting it so it can't nose down. And as it stops, then complete your flare. So that's what you want to do. Hopefully seeing that on this little glider helps you guys out. All right, good luck on that one. And let's go to number 36. All right, number 36. Unless you are close to obstacles, the best airspeed to fly in varying lift and sink conditions to maximize your flight time is A, minimum sink speed, B, maximum lift over drag, L over D, or best glide, airspeed. Option C, slow in lift, quick in sink, or option D, quick in lift and slow in sink. All right, so that's a little bit confusing if you don't understand minimum sink speed or lift over drag slash best glide speed. So you have to be familiar with those terms, the terminology of all that, because you'll see it written in different ways on the test. And so they're kind of double testing you to make sure what you do and don't know, okay? So think about how you would answer this one and pause it and come on back and we'll review the answer. Welcome back, everybody. The answer to question 36 is C. You want to fly slow in lift and quick in sink, okay? The answer is on page 142. So we've already been on this page, but welcome back to page 142. And this time we're on the right side of the page. It says lift or sink conditions. As a general rule of thumb, you should fly slowly in lift and quickly in sink. If we scroll down and look at the diagram that they provided, it kind of helps us see in an illustration of what this does. If we fly slow in lift, we're hoping to spend more time getting more lift. And where we don't have lift, we want to speed up so that, we're covering ground, we're covering distance, trying to find the next lift again. If we fly slow in sink, we're going to sink more during that time. And I hope that that illustration helps. But if not, just really quick with this little glider, imagine that right here, we hit some lift, okay? So we come in, we feel some lift. If you fly fast through that, you're gonna go right out of the lift band and bye-bye lift and welcome to your decreasing altitude. So you want to try to spend time in there, and that's why we hang glider pilots, which I haven't done this yet, but gosh, man, hopefully soon. We wanna start turning, coring in those thermals so that we can spend more time in them. And that's why you wanna make some nice controlled turns. You don't wanna do slipping turns in a thermal. You wanna have these nice controlled turns staying in the thermal so you can continue to get height. Once you've got height and you need to leave that thermal, you'll leave that thermal. Let's say we have another one over here somewhere that unfortunately we can't see with our X-ray glasses. But if we were to continue flying slow in the sink, then we're just going to sink slowly and hopefully get that next lift, hopefully. But if we fly quickly, after we leave this thermal and we're headed to this one, we fly quickly, we lose less altitude, we get to it, now we fly slow again, thermal up again, and go on our way, okay? You guys are gonna do rad. All right, question number 37. Stalls only occur during low speeds, like when you're flying too slow. All right, think about how you would answer this question and then pause the video and then rejoin us for the answer. Welcome back. Okay, so stalls only occur during low speeds when you're flying too slow. Is that true or false? The answer is false, option B. Let's go check this out in the book. It's on page 130. And here it talks about accelerated stalls and it gives some information about what that is. So we'll just read that real quick. An accelerated stall occurs when the glider is stalled while flying with extra airspeed, as when the pilot dives to pick up airspeed. It's also referred to as a whip stall. All right. And then the actual answer is right here in the middle section of the book. It says, remember that stalls don't occur only at low speeds. In theory, you can even stall a glider in a steep dive by increasing the angle of attack suddenly and sharply. Remember, a wing stalls when it meets the relative wind at too great an angle, no matter where the nose is in relation to the horizon. All right, so they are trying to trick us a little bit in this question, because when you think of a stall, what happens when you stall? You stop, right? So stopping is slow. So it kind of, in a way, makes sense to say that if you stall, you're flying slow because you're not flying anymore. You've stalled. But that's not what they're saying. In fact, if we think about question number 34 that we already went over, we talk about a downwind stall, right? So when you're flying downwind, you're generally going to be flying a faster ground speed, at least, than you're flying when you're flying into a headwind or flying upwind, where you might not be moving at all. Your ground speed might be 0, but your airspeed could be 25 miles an hour, right? And then, of course, we think about John Heine, who loops his glider a lot. And to do that, he puts it into an enormous dive, and then he increases that angle of attack and gets very close to a stall and comes back around. And so you can stall when you have an incredible amount of airspeed. So sort of a trick question. Just want to make sure that you guys are really ready for that one. I know you're going to get it because you guys are awesome. All right, let's go check out number 38. All right, question number 38. Angle of attack is controlled by raising and lowering the nose of the glider in flight. Too high an angle of attack causes the glider to stall, while too low an angle of attack causes the glider to dive quickly. Angle of attack is the angle between option A, the wing and the ground, option B, the wing and the horizon, option C, the median chord line of the wing and the relative flow. All right, think about this one. How would you answer this on the Hang 2 test? Pause it and then come back for the answer. All right, and the answer is option C, the median chord line of the wing and the relative airflow. So we're going to go back to page 129 in the book, and we're going to review a little bit here about angle of attack. And it says, the angle of attack is the angle between the wing and the relative wind flowing over it, not the wing and the ground, okay? So it's telling us option A is not the answer because it's not the wing and the ground. And then we go down lower here. It says, no matter what you're doing, whether you're flying straight ahead, turning, diving, doesn't matter what you're doing, whatever you're doing, the angle of attack is increased when you raise the nose and reduced when you lower it. And then down here at the very bottom again, it says the angle of attack is the angle between the wing and the relative wind. So again, with our glider, if we're flying, whichever way we're flying, you have pitch attitude, right? Which is talking about, like, you think of like in an airplane, they have that little symbol for the horizon, and you go above or below that horizon. That's your pitch attitude, okay? But when we're talking angle of attack, we're talking about attacking the wind or the relative wind, and whether we're increasing or decreasing our pitch to the relative wind. That's the wind that is just flowing over the wing. So if we're flying straight, even if we're flying straight at the horizon, then great, sure, there we are neutral, there we are increased, decreased angle of attack to the relative wind. If we're in a dive, now the relative wind is still coming straight over us this way. So if we pop up this way, we have increased our angle of attack. If we're flying really fast up like this, the relative wind is coming over our wing this way. So if we pop up a little bit more, we've increased our angle of attack. If the wind is coming down at us like this and we're flying up and we pop our nose down, we've decreased our angle of attack. So it has nothing to do with the horizon. Now to address this whole median chord line, like what is it talking about? What chord? We're not talking about chords on a guitar or a piano or any instrument. We are talking about the distance of our wing from the leading edge, okay, the front edge, the leading edge, to the trailing edge. The front of the wing, the back of the wing, right? If you want to talk about it in simple terms. But when we're looking at our hang glider, the front, this whole thing is our leading edge, and the entire backside here, that is our trailing edge. So the distance between the leading edge and the trailing edge is our chord line, all right? Now, You don't have to get into all, and we're not going to get into all the specifics of, well, is the cord line from the nose to, the edge back here, or is it the distance here? The answer is yes. You have your root cord line right down the middle of your wing. You have your wingtip cord line. But the point is, the cord line is the distance between your leading edge and your trailing edge. So don't spend too much time getting confused about that, because what it's just trying to tell you is essentially this area, or our keel, the area that goes straight from the front to the back. If you change that pitch attitude, increase or decrease to the relative wind flow, then that is your angle of attack. So don't confuse that with horizon or anything else, all right? That should help you guys. You guys are super bright, super smart, and super awesome. How do I know that? Because you're watching this channel. So you guys are gonna do really good on this one. All right, but let's also go look at page 146. Here on 146, it talks a little bit about this cord line thing. In aspect ratio, it says aspect ratio in crude terms is a measure of how long and skinny a wing is. A long, narrow wing tends to be more efficient than a shorter spanned one with a wider cord. All right. So again, if we pretend that this is like a single surface Falcon 4, it's got a very wide cord, right? Very wide cord. Whereas if you think about going up into those rigid wings like the Atos VR, it has a very skinny cord. It is not a very wide wing. It's a very long wing, longer than the Falcon, but the cord line is smaller. Awesome. Great job. Let's go to question 39. All right, question 39. Question 39 says, all hang gliders are designed to carry pilots within a specified range of weight. How can you determine if a hang glider size is too large or too small for you? All right, option A says by flying it. Sluggish response to roll input means it's too large, while stalling at fast speeds means it's too small. Option B says by checking the HGMA placard on the glider or asking your instructor. And option C is ask the prior owner who you bought it from. All right, how would you guys answer this one on the test? Think about that. Pause the video if you need to, and we will go over the answer. Welcome back. All right, so the answer to 39 is B, by checking the HGMA placard on the glider or asking your instructor. So let's go to the book and check out page 35. Here on page 35, it says a USHGA, or United States Hang Gliding Association. It's what they were before they were USHPA. A United States Hang Gliding Association certified instructor can recommend a glider appropriate for you. And yes, they should be able to do that. Hopefully they can. If they can't, I don't know why they're instructing. And then it says the glider must also be the right size for you. HGMA certified gliders have an information sticker. It's known as a placard located on the airframe. The placard shows the weight range the glider is designed to carry. I'll show you guys here a picture of what my HGMA placard looks like on my Wheels Wing Falcon 4 195. And you can see that information there, and it does show recommended weight. And an interesting note about this is you have to think about what is your weight when you're standing on the scale, but you also have to think about the weight of everything else you're attaching to yourself. Your helmet, your clothes, your gloves, your harness, anything you might be carrying in your harness, like a cell phone or whatever. You want to know what is your full weight once you're clipped in to that glider. So that is important. And both of those weights are important. Know what your weight is, know what the weight of you and all your equipment is. Make sure you're within the range. I myself happen to be right on the border where I could have bought a Falcon 170 or a 195. And I decided that, I don't know what all I'm going to maybe carry in my harness or something with me, or how heavy my helmet's going to be once I buy a new one or whatever. And so the 195 made more sense because I was kind of more on the max weight for a Falcon 170. So those are definitely important things to think about. And I I mean, obviously talk to your instructor or your flight school. They're going to be very knowledgeable. But don't just go with their recommendations. Put in a lot of your own research and learn how to be able to tell, from either the manual or the vendor's website about what the weight ranges are for the gliders that you're looking at potentially purchasing, especially if it's going to be a used glider. You don't want to just ask the prior owner. Of course, they probably know, they hopefully know, but if you're just going to like trust them, that's obviously the wrong way to answer a test question. It's not a bad question to ask a previous owner who's selling a used glider or a vendor who sells used gliders. But you definitely want to make sure that you know how to go look at this information yourself. And option A would be a terrible one to answer when it says just by flying it. You don't ever want to go out and just buy a glider if you haven't checked the weight ranges and all of those things. That would just be a completely unsafe thing to do. So you guys are going to kill it on this question. I have no doubts. Let's go check out number 40. All right, question number 40. You maintain good airspeed to turn the glider and now want to initiate a turn. You move your shoulders to the side you want to turn. However, your feet shift the opposite way. The glider will A, turn perfectly in the direction intended, B, turn sluggishly but in the correct direction, option C, turn in the opposite direction you wanted to go, D, not turn, or E, C and or D. All right, so again, think about how you would answer this question on the test, pause it, and then come back. And welcome back, everybody. All right, the answer to number 40 is option E. Both C and D are potential good answers for this one. And we can find this on a few different pages here in the book. So let's start with page 52 to 53. And if we look at page 52, here in the cross-controlling section, it says, this is a common problem. If you move your shoulders toward the high wing, but inadvertently shift your feet the other way, you won't achieve anything. And there's a good diagram right below it where it's got the right way and the wrong way. And it says that for the wrong way, these two actions, moving your shoulders one way and your feet the other way, it cancels each other out. So a lot of times that can mean that nothing happens. And we look down further, it says solution. Concentrate on moving your hips and feet, then your shoulders toward the high wing. Make sure you aren't twisting your body. If we look on the next page, page 53, it says, and this is talking about the diagram we looked at on page 52, but it says cross-controlling is a common problem for many new pilots. You can avoid cross-controlling by leading with your feet and hips as you shift your weight. This ensures you don't inadvertently shift part of your weight to the wrong side, canceling out your turn correction. And then if we skip over to that page 162, we have a little bit more information here again on cross-controlling, especially as it pertains to the question and answer here on number 40. It says if the glider doesn't respond properly to your corrections and your turn inputs, you're probably flying too slowly, cross-controlling, or both. And again, to guard against cross-controlling, make sure to lead with your feet and hips when you make a roll input. It may help to think of your feet as a rudder that you shift in the direction you want to turn. So I can definitely attest to this, you guys. As a brand new Hang 2 pilot, I've had my share of cross-controlling. I notice when I'm doing it, and I really work on trying to kick my feet out more. I have found that the transition of going from an apron harness into a pod harness is one of the biggest changes that I've experienced so far with hang gliding, is going from the apron harness to the pod harness, because the way that you're able to shift your weight is different. And this also includes moving from flying the glider by the down tubes to now flying by the base bar. And so that combination, apron harness, flying with down tubes, that is all I did in my lessons. And never flew with the base bar during lessons. And so when I got out of lessons, I started experimenting with the base bar. Felt very, very different. And every pilot that I know who's been flying for a while feels mostly really good control from the base bar. and definitely still shifts to the down tubes for landing. But you can get a lot of control by flying with the down tubes, but you're not going to want to do that for like a long flight. You're going to wear your shoulders out. And so, but there really is a big difference in going from the apron harness to the pod harness, because instead of your whole body being essentially vertical and your legs dangling down constantly, they're now up in this bag, and you cannot move your body in the same way. So it feels different on your hips, on your back, on your shoulders, on your legs, on your feet, everything being in a pod harness. And I assume that's very, very similar for a cocoon harness, but I haven't flown in one yet, so I don't know. But I am trying to work very hard now on initiating my roll inputs with my feet and my hips, and also making sure that my shoulders are moving in that direction as well. Okay, you really want your whole body going. You don't want just your shoulders, not your hips or feet. You also don't want just your feet and hips, but not your shoulders. That all those actions will either cancel out, or you'll get a very slow roll control, or you'll get the opposite of what you want. So watch out for that. Be careful of that. Good luck experimenting with that, and have fun flying and paying attention to cross-controlling and correcting those inputs. All right, let's go on to question 41. All right, we're on our last 3 questions here, and you guys are doing awesome. So let's hit number 41, which says, flying through a location that has a wind shadow without adjusting your hang glider's pitch may cause a what? All right, so our options are A, a more extended glide path, B, a loss of airspeed and potentially a stall, or C, sudden altitude increase. So if you're flying through a wind shadow, think about what you think would happen. Would you go slower? Would you go faster? Would you stop? What would happen? And go ahead and pause, and then come right back for the answer. All right, welcome back, everybody. So the answer to question 41 is B, a loss of airspeed and potentially a stall. So let's find out why. And let's look on page 88 here in the book. And there's the section here that talks about wind shadow. This whole page is basically talking about wind shadow. It gives a pretty cool little diagram showing where the wind shadow exists off of the buildings based on the way the wind is flowing. So if we look at the wind flowing from the right side of the page toward the left side, and the hang glider guy is flying into the headwind, he's flying upwind, and we see that the shadow is behind the trees and behind the little barn thing here. And that is our wind shadow. So don't confuse it with like a shadow of light where the sun is or is not lighting something up. And that'll be talked about later. Those are like our katabatic and anabatic winds going up and down hillsides or mountainsides, whether they have sunlight on them or not. Don't confuse wind shadow with that. So let's find out what wind shadow is. Under this orange section here, it says wind shadow. Objects such as trees, buildings, and hills shadow the wind, creating a zone of slow-moving air behind them, as in the illustration above. You must be aware that your glider's airspeed will fall off rapidly when you fly into an area of wind shadow, and be prepared. Avoid areas of wind shadow if you can. If you must fly into an area where there is likely to be wind shadow, increase airspeed immediately to avoid an accidental stall. All right, and just on the left side here, let's read this as well, just to reinforce the whole point, but it says there will be a zone of slow moving or still air in the area downwind of obstacles. You'll lose airspeed rapidly when you fly into these wind shadowed areas, so avoid them when possible. If you must fly into a wind shadowed area, increase airspeed sharply to prevent an accidental stall. And the flight tip on the right side is also good information. This is a point we've hit before, but it's always great to hit again. So flight tip, if you picture what water does as it flows down a stream bed and passes over different sorts of obstacles, you'll have a head start on understanding how the air behaves. Air eddies and swirls in almost exactly the same way as it flows over the earth and encounters obstacles such as trees, houses, and hills. So if you guys think about like you're just out walking on a normal day, a very windy day though, and the wind is blowing your hair, it's blowing your clothes, maybe you're carrying stuff like papers or something, and you don't want the wind to blow it. And say you're walking on one side of a building, like, I don't know, pick a side, east side, west side, whatever, and you try to run around to the north side of that building because the wind is kind of coming from the south, and you're like, okay, good, I can fix my hair here because the building is blocking the wind. Or maybe you're out hiking and you notice that on the north side of a tree, the wind isn't bothering you as much as it is on the south side because that tree is providing wind shadow. So we've all experienced this many times, and that's exactly all that wind shadow is. So because you're not in the area behind an object where the wind is whipping back together, it's rotoring, or it's creating turbulence or something like that, where it mixes back with itself in the rest of that flow, you're just in that protected area. That's the wind shadow. So don't forget that one on the test. Don't confuse it with anabatic or katabatic winds or any of those other types of things. Wind shadow is just the wind being blocked by an object, really kind of directly by that object or near that object. That's your wind shadow. Now, of course, if you try to fly slow through wind shadow and you've got no headwind providing lift, you've got no wind now coming over the wing of your hang glider, that's why it's a problem. And that's why you have to increase your speed to prepare for that shadow if you can't avoid flying through it. Now, if you can avoid flying through it, do that. Keep yourself safe. All right. I think you guys are going to do great on this one. So let's go on to number 42. All right. Question number 42. Mechanical turbulence is created once air strikes objects in its path. So it gives some examples here. It says houses, trees, hills, mountains, etc. In moderate to strong winds, this rotor turbulence can be found blank of a hill, ridge, or mountain. All right, so our options here are A, behind and below the top, B, directly above and in front, C, downwind, D, upwind, and E is options A and C. All right, how would you answer this on the Hang 2 test? Pause it and then rejoin us for the answer. Welcome back, everybody. The answer to number 42 is E. It is both A and C. So behind and below the top, as well as downwind. So let's find out why. The answer is on page 84. And page 84 talks about different types of turbulence. In fact, it says right here, there are two fundamental types of turbulence, and those are your thermal turbulence and your mechanical turbulence. And then we have different kinds within each category. But mechanical turbulence is something I talk about a lot, especially when I talk about rotor. We definitely have rotor on the top of the point of the mountain where I'm flying a lot right now. The south side of the point of the mountain, you've got this ridge lift effect. So the wind is, slamming into the south side of the point of the mountain and then blowing up, giving you this nice ridge lift. But as it goes over the top, it has this kind of rolling rotor type motion, just exactly the same way that water does when it flows over a rock in a river. It's turbulent behind the rock or downwind of that rock, if you will. So here it says mechanical turbulence is produced when wind strikes objects in its path, such as houses, trees, hills, cliffs, or other obstructions. In light winds, the effect will not be pronounced, but in strong winds, the air downwind from these objects will be so rough that you may not be able to control the glider properly. The swirling of air downwind of obstacles is often referred to by pilots as rotor turbulence or simply rotor. Now, keep in mind, we just went over wind shadow in question 41, and now we're talking about the wind that is downwind or behind these objects that the wind is encountering, right? So you are going to have your area of wind shadow where there's just no wind or very light wind. It's sort of this small protected little pocket. But past that, that wind is going to all start mixing back with itself, with the parts that didn't hit the tree or the hill or the building or the car or whatever it is encountering in its way. And so that's where you get all of this mechanical turbulence, all right? And don't confuse the mechanical turbulence with the thermal turbulence, that they're caused by different reasons. So mechanical turbulence is simply when air is striking an object in its path, okay? And so that turbulence will be downwind as well as behind and below the top of like a hill or a mountain or whatever, all right? And you guys are gonna do awesome on this one as well, I have no doubts. So let's go on to our very last question, number 43. All right, everybody, thanks for sticking with me through this whole thing. We've got one more question to go, number 43. But before we do, I just wanted to take one more opportunity to say, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. I'm working really hard on these videos to help you guys pass this test. So if you're not subscribing, what are you doing? All right, hit that like button and leave me a comment. Let me know how I'm doing on these and let me know if they're helping you. All right, let's go to 43. It says, when your glider descends to land in moderate to strong winds, you should expect to encounter a wind gradient. If you're landing into the wind, what effect will the gradient have on the airspeed of the glider? Okay, this is a really cool one. I actually encounter this a lot when I am flying at the point of the mountain. And so I actually have some experience with this, which obviously helps set that into your mind. So hopefully you guys get some experience with this as well, and it'll make things make a lot more sense. But your options here are A, airspeed will increase, B, airspeed will decrease, C, airspeed changes won't be significant or noticeable, and D, the gradient will roll the glider. Okay. How would you guys answer this on the test? Think about that, pause it, give yourself some time, choose your answer, and then come back and we will review what the correct answer is. Welcome back, everybody. All right, the answer to our last question today, the answer to number 43 is B. Airspeed will decrease. Okay, so let's check this out on page 84 and also 85 of the book. And you see the section here on the right side of the page of wind gradient. So let's read this so we understand exactly what we're talking about, and then we'll show a diagram as well. It says, because of the friction created by the movement of air over the earth, the wind slows next to the ground. That's kind of crazy, right? I mean, if you guys think about a really windy day when you're walking on the ground, down low in a valley or whatever, you're not on top of a mountain, a very windy day, think about how crazy those the winds aloft must be, or the winds up above you in the sky. They're probably a lot more crazy. All right, so moving on, it says, creating a layer of slower moving air that lays over the earth like the icing on a cake. Oh man, I wish that the air tasted like cake icing. That would be awesome. The effect can be extremely pronounced, and pilots must be aware of this phenomenon, which is referred to as a wind gradient. For example, 50 feet above the ground, the wind may be blowing at 20 miles per hour, but lower down it will be considerably less. At 25 feet, the wind may be slowed to 15 miles per hour, and at 10 feet, it may be as slow as 5 to 8 miles per hour. Okay, so the winds are moving faster up above us throughout the air and the skies above us because it's not inhibited by hills, mountains, trees, buildings, cars, cows, cats, lizards, whatever, all right? And then here in the highlighted orange part, it says, a pilot on landing approach will encounter falling wind speed as he or she descends through the gradient layer, causing a rapid and dramatic decrease in airspeed. For this reason, and here's our answer, everybody, for this reason, you should never fly a landing approach without increasing your airspeed substantially. Make sure that you do that increase your airspeed, right? Pull in your base bar, your control bar, your speed bar, pull that in, have speed so that you have control, because as you fly down lower through these different gradients of wind that are getting slower, that'll take away some of your control of your glider, and that could be dangerous. So as you're getting closer to the ground on your landing approach, increase your own speed, because the speed of the wind will slow down. If the speed of the wind slows down, your headwind, if it slows down, you're gonna lose lift, all right? And that can be dangerous, especially as you're approaching the ground. So let's flip this over to page 85 next door and look at this diagram. And I kind of like this one because it just very clearly shows what a wind gradient is. So the higher you are, the faster those wind speeds are moving. If you ever go and you look at your app that you use for looking at what the winds are doing in your flying area on a given day, you'll see that the higher it goes, the faster the winds are going. I've seen days where I'm flying at like 14-mile-an-hour winds at Point of the Mountain, and yet it'll say the winds up at like 14,000 feet are doing like 60 miles an hour. So there's definitely wind gradients, and you have to understand that. And you just have to understand that as you get closer to the ground, they get slower. As you get closer up to the moon, they get faster. Okay, so this diagram shows just literally how important it is to maintain your speed control as you're coming in for a landing. All right, that's it on this one, you guys, and I hope you are watching this entire series and that it is helping you tremendously as you prepare for your Hang 2 test. If you haven't talked to your instructor or flight school about this series of videos and you are currently working towards your Hang 2, let them know about it so they can tell other students. That would really help me out, which I would greatly appreciate since I'm helping you guys practice for this test, and just really spreading the word and getting me to have more feedback as well from more viewers watching this who are working on their Hang 2. Or if you're even a paraglider pilot or something else and you just are here watching these because maybe it's applicable to you in certain areas, let me know that. Definitely want to hear from you guys. Again, thank you and good luck on your H2 test and getting your rating. I can't wait for you to pass so that you can come fly with me.